Hello bookmarks and bookworms, welcome back to the channel, and hello if you are new. Today is a very exciting video for me. I will be predicting what I think is going to be on this year's Portico Prize Longlist, which is a very exciting prize. For those of you that don't know, this prize celebrates fiction, non-fiction and poetry all coming out of the north of England. This prize happens once every 2 years, so this long list will technically be referred to as the Portico Prize 2024 long list because the winner is announced in January of every other year, and so the last prize was announced January 2022, and so this one will be announced 2024. So we are expecting a long list at some point, so that then the shortlist will get announced around December time and then the ultimate winner announced in January. There is a £10,000 prize money up for grabs, and as I say, the winner goes to the book that best evokes the spirit of the North. Now, I know for most of my viewers who are over in America, it's hard to fathom how there would be such a large divide in a country that is smaller than Colorado. You know, you don't have a north-south divide necessarily in such a tiny state as Colorado, and yet there is a huge difference between the north and south of England, politically, socially, economically. I have followed this prize for at least the past 4 years, and it actually introduced me to one of my favourite authors, Jessica Andrews, as her novel Saltwater won, I believe, in 2020. So if you'd never heard of the prize until now you know, and after that very brief introduction, I will now dive into the 11 predictions I have for this prize, which include 7 pieces of fiction, 2 pieces of non-fiction and 2 poetry collections. This prize is run by the Portico Library, whose Instagram handle I will leave in the description box below if you'd like to follow along on their social media to keep up to date with all of their announcements regarding the prize and also the other kind of fun stuff they have going on at the library. So first up we have the novel that potentially the most people are going to have already heard about, which is Eliza Clark's new novel Penance. I really enjoyed, along with everybody else I think, Eliza Clark's Boy Parts, but I was less keen on this new novel by her. It's still making the predictions list because I feel like it's definitely a contender to be longlisted, if not go even further in the Portico Prize this year. But Penance is very graphic. It is a true crime novel, and we start out with essentially the murder of a teenage girl by her peers. It is not structured as a traditional novel would be, in that it's not one single narrative. It's comprised of transcripts, witness testimony and interviews of the girls involved, as well as written correspondence and the writings of the girls themselves, and, as I referenced before, very explicit reimaginings of the events and also the murder of the girl in the very first chapter. For me, it was a combination of the odd, I guess unique formatting in that you do move around in style quite a lot, and also just the sheer gruesomeness and barbarity of the murder itself just led me to DNF it. But people are rightly praising this for its experimental approach, and it's certainly very, very different to Eliza Clark's first novel, showing the versatility of this new upcoming author, which, to be honest, is exactly what she wanted, because I think Boy Parts may have pigeonholed her against her will as this sort of mental health TikTok author, and so I can see this novel doing really well in a prize that is all about evoking the spirit of the north of England, because Eliza Clark uses the sense of place very, very strongly in this novel, to the extent that almost the political and social context that is wrapped around Eliza Clark's novel almost becomes a character in itself. This is very heavily set in place, and so I feel like a prize that wants to celebrate the north of England would be very keen on promoting this novel. Next up, I am going to predict that Jennifer Saint is going to be on the Portico Prize longlist with her novel Atalanta, which is a Greek myth retelling of the woman who was the only woman in the famous band of heroes called the Argonauts. She also was a fierce huntress raised by bears and also had links to Artemis, the goddess of hunting. This may be a long shot because obviously this is not set in the north of England, right? The writer is from the north of England and that's why it would qualify, but this is set in the world of ancient Greece, not the world of Manchester. So that's the only thing that's making me think, would they go for this? But I feel like just the mass popularity of the Greek myth retellings that we've had in the last maybe decade or so may then be reflected on a long list, because the long list will reflect contemporary likes and dislikes as well as contemporary society and politics. And so in terms of our likes and dislikes generally as a readership, we do seem to be in a bit of a Greek myth retelling phase of our reading lives, and so I feel like this book may get its space on the long list. The next book that I'm predicting for this long list is coming from one of my favourite authors. This is Benjamin Myers' Cuddy. Benjamin Myers has won this prize before with his novel Bee Stings, which I read earlier on this year in January and gave 5 stars. He is a fantastic author, and this one, Cuddy, is his latest novel, which means it's eligible for the Portico Prize 2024. This novel is doing something very different to what he's done before. It is a non-traditional narrative, and I think that's partly why it wasn't quite my cup of tea when I picked it up in May this year, but that's not to say it's not deserving of a place on this list, and I very much expect to see it there. Come hell or high water, I expect to see Benjamin Myers on the Portico Prize longlist this year. This is a piece of historical fiction recounting the life of St Cuthbert, who is the patron saint of the north of England. It may be easier to see this novel as actually a series of interconnected short stories, as we follow different people on their journey with very little that holds them together, aside from this general overarching narrative of St Cuthbert and how they're all linked to him in some way. This is definitely challenging, as I say, what we traditionally view as a novel, and I feel like a literary prize, the Portico Prize, would be championing experimental ideas and playing with form and structure, and this is certainly that. Some people have loved this in the reviews that I've seen for it on Goodreads, and other people, like me, are quite hesitant, don't think we fully grasped the narrative structure of this, and so it is going to be a case of love or hate this book. I think there are a lot of us on BookTube and Bookstagram that were very surprised not to see Cuddy on this year's Booker Prize longlist, and so hopefully being nominated for the Portico Prize will give Benjamin Myers a much better shot at winning, because he is such an outstanding author that any talented author coming up against him is going to struggle, because he's just that good. My fourth prediction for this year's Portico Prize longlist is The New Life by Tom Crew. This is a piece of queer historical fiction where 2 men, John and Henry, who are both married to women and are living in the Victorian era, come together to write a book. Whilst I haven't read this novel myself, this novel made it onto the Orwell Prize for Political Fiction earlier on in the year, and I do keep an eye on all of the books that get nominated for the Orwell Prize each year, because I feel like those novels tend to pop up again in some of the other literary prizes, whether it's the Booker, whether it's the Women's, the Portico. And so as The New Life was on the Orwell Prize and it hasn't popped up again on things like the Booker, I feel maybe it will pop up on the Portico Prize, which is celebrating work coming out of the north of England, for which this would be an incredibly strong contender that's already been recognised by other major literary prizes. The next book is the first non-fiction to feature on my predictions list. This is Pip Fallow with Being Dragged Up Proper, growing up in Britain's forgotten north. This is essentially a coming-of-age narrative about a young boy growing up in the north of England. Pip was born in a coal miner's cottage outside of Durham, and this book is largely talking about the contemporary issues facing the north today, like the north-south divide, social mobility, class, as well as the devastating impacts of deindustrialisation and also government neglect. So a memoir talking about the issues that are facing the contemporary north of England today. I feel like that fits the brief perfectly, and so would this be then on the long list this year? Who knows, I hope so. In a similar vein to Pip Fallow's, Alex Niven has a piece of non-fiction as well that I'm putting on my predictions list. This is The North Will Rise Again, and this is a piece of non-fiction that is touching on a lot of the same themes and topics that Pip Fallow's talks about. And in this one, we largely see the social and cultural history of the north of England covering the last couple of decades. So it may actually be a great one to read in tandem with Pip Fallow's. And if you are a non-fiction lover, you can kind of get both of them, the memoir, the more sort of personal, intimate coming of age narrative, alongside Alex Nivens, who will be giving you more of a history from a more factual and broader standpoint. The next prediction that I have for you goes back into the fiction territory. This is Charlotte Levin, and this is called If I Let You Go. This is essentially about a woman dealing with grief and loss. Janet is a cleaner who suffered a great and tragic loss about 10-11 years ago, and during this novel she is caught up in a train crash, the ramifications of which lead to her getting more of a purpose back in life. And having witnessed a lot of book prizes this year focusing on not only women and loss and grief and motherhood and all of those things, I feel like this book slightly just nudges into that category of isolated woman who's suffered a lot of trauma and grief and loss, and so potentially fits into the kind of narrative book prize arc, if we're going to have one for this year, of those themes. So potentially this is one to watch for the Portico. Next up we have Jo Baker with The Midnight News. This is a World War II novel, and I have read one of Jo Baker's novels before. I read Longbourn, which essentially takes the story of Pride and Prejudice but tells it from the perspective of the lower house and the maids and servants and whatnot. In this novel, which is set in World War II, we follow a young woman during the Blitz who has lost her brother to the war. It's primarily a love story with a little mystery element twist, because our protagonist's friends are being targeted by some sort of stalker in the night and follows them as they go home from their job at the Ministry of Intelligence as typists. And one night our protagonist feels like she's the one being stalked this time, and so it has that cat and mouse type mystery element coupled with the backdrop of London and the Blitz and the fear that would be circulating at the time anyway, without a midnight stalker encroaching upon these girls' lives. Going on to my last three predictions then, two of them are poetry collections. The first one is called Material Properties by Jacob Polly. This is Jacob's fifth poetry collection, and it says here, this collection asks what it might mean to interpret and translate wildness into human language and human understanding. The book is a multifaceted and vital exploration of the non-human, the elemental, and the borders between existences. Through poems of parenthood at a time of environmental emergency, and poetic versions of Old English riddles in which animals, objects, and natural phenomena speak, the book poses essential questions about our relationship with the living world and with each other. So that really appeals to me. I hardly ever read poetry, but if anything's going to appeal to me poetry-wise, that collection seems to have me all over it. So it has the themes of nature and language and parenthood, all of which would be things that I'd be interested in reading about in my poetry. So going on to the second poetry collection that I have specifically highlighted and think that it will have a shot of this year's Portico Prize, and that's from Katie Hale. This will be Katie's debut poetry collection, so what an amazing thing if she right out of the gates gets nominated for the Portico Prize this year. This poetry collection is called White Ghosts, and it says here that this collection traces maternal lines and the legacies of slavery and whiteness interwoven into the fabric of America through revealing, unflinching poems. Through 400 years of female migration, the poems in White Ghosts use art, music, and lyrical reworking of the created spaces to address what is lost through generations and what is passed on. So I really like the sound of that. Again, more themes of motherhood and memory, which have been massive themes in the book prizes of 2023 just in general. If you think about the International Booker and the Booker, Motherhood and memory just seem to be buzzword themes for 2023. And last but not least, we're coming to my personal favourite. The final book that I think is going to be on this year's Portico Prize list is Jessica Andrews' new novel, Milk Teeth. I read Jessica Andrews' novel Saltwater as a result of it winning the Portico Prize several years ago. That was her debut novel, and this next instalment, Milk Teeth, is just as sublime. This is one of those coming of age, no plot, just vibes narratives that myself and people of my generation just seem to be eating up to no end in the recent years. It would be brilliant to see Jessica Andrews do the double with this prize and win twice. However, with such amazing contenders against her potentially on this list this year, she's certainly got her work cut out for her. In Milk Teeth, we follow a similar protagonist to that of Saltwater, in that we follow a young female in her early 20s as she deals with love and travel. In fact, she actually goes to France and Spain, and we flash forward and backward from her childhood in England to the romantic struggles and life struggles that she's dealing with now living abroad. Jessica Andrews' writing is poetic and powerful in its meaning, and absolutely gut-wrenching in how deeply her words can be felt by the reader. And so this, for me, would be my natural winner every time because it's Jessica Andrews. But we shall see what the Portico Prize judges think. As I say, the rough schedule that we have for the Portico Prize is that the winner is announced sometime in January 2024, and their shortlist and long lists are released respectively before that, right? So between now and December, I'm expecting a long list and a short list to then hear what the ultimate winner will be in January. So I should be following this prize very closely. When the long list is announced, I'll be doing my usual reaction videos on this channel. So follow along with me. Let me know down in the comments below, have you heard of this prize? Will you be following along? And which books out of these have you not heard of? Maybe there's a few that have piqued your interest. Which one of these books will you be picking up? Best of luck to all the authors who are eligible for this prize, and also best of luck to the judges. I hope you have a lovely time judging. I've enjoyed so many books that have been longlisted, shortlisted and won the Portico Prize over the years, and so I have total faith that we're going to have a wonderful, expansive long list to read from this year. So join along and I shall see you in the next video as always, guys. Bye!